So let's begin with this Mind Over Genes, the new biology. Go ahead, sorry. This is from a gentleman named Bruce Lipton, whose book, The Biology of Belief, is a terrific book. He was a researcher, a cell biologist, and he made some amazing discoveries. And that's one book that I highly recommend. But I grabbed from one of his web pages a kind of an excerpt from his book, or kind of a summary of some of the information in that book, and it's exactly what we want to play with here. And I know it's very taboo to just read stuff, but I want to kind of go through some of these paragraphs and read and then discuss and read and discuss, so that we all make sure we're capturing what we're trying to learn here. Because really, I mean, if you want to understand the power of changing and the power of improving your internal and external environment, this is really the heart of the matter. This is the master system. If we can get some hold of it and understand how it works and why it works, then we start to see things really happen for us in powerful and positive ways if we're conscious.
Did you say the book was The Biology of Belief?
Biology of Belief. Bruce Lipton. He's written several other books, which I haven't read, but I've read nearly all of Biology of Belief and really like it. So he starts off, let's see, oh, Terry, you need one of these, right? He starts off discussing his connection to cell biology. Sure. And historically, when we talk about genes, you know, they're the... He mentions in here that in the beginning, he says, I actively supported the perspective that the human body was a biochemical machine programmed by its genes. We've all heard that before, yes? Genetically, I have blue eyes. Genetically, whatever. Genetically, I am an alcoholic. Genetically, whatever. We've all heard that before. We scientists believe that our strengths, such as our artistic and intellectual abilities, and our weaknesses, such as cardiovascular disease, cancer, depression, represent traits that were programmed into our genes. And then he says in the next one, though the power of genes is still emphasized in current biology courses and textbooks, a radically new understanding has emerged at the leading edge of cell science. It is now recognized that the environment, and this is what he spends a third of his book explaining, and this is why we're not going to get into it here, but this idea that the environment, and more specifically our perception of the environment, directly controls the activity of our genes. He was able to see how that happened under a microscope. How depending on what the environment was, which was based entirely on our perceptions, the environment of the gene, of the cell. It was based entirely on our perceptions, is what made the cell do whatever it does, not the genes. Erica.
I have two questions about that. We started it last week a little bit. First is, does he specify as far as the genes affecting our characteristics and abilities versus like physical traits? Because I can't imagine that a newborn can influence through his opinions or her opinions what he will physically look like. Okay.
No, that blueprint's still in place.
Right.
And that is, unless the environment is modified, that blueprint will emerge as the blueprint is set.
Okay.
Okay, so especially physical characteristics, those kind of things.
Okay.
So yeah.
And my other question, since you started psychology, you know the debate between nurture and nature. Is this a little more the answer as to it's more nurture that affects our...
Jenny actually mentions that in here.
Okay.
That there is a third component. There's nature, genes. Okay, I can't help it. I'm going to go have this Coke because I can't help it. It's in my genes. You know, that's dumb, but some people might say, I can't help it. It's in my parents were Coke drinkers, my grandparents were Coke drinkers. I'm sure it's in my genes that I have to drink Coke. But there are things that logically really do, yeah, we can say, yeah, I have these tendencies maybe because of the genes. But the other argument is, no, it's nurtured in them from the beginning, and he actually mentions that in here in an interesting way.
What's the third part?
Conscious awareness, mindful conscious awareness and choice. So hold on to that idea for just a second. Environment controls gene activity through a process known as epigenetic control. This new perspective of human biology does not view the body as just a mechanical device, but rather incorporates the role of a mind and a spirit. This breakthrough in biology is fundamental in all healing, for it recognizes that when we change our perceptions or belief, we send totally different messages to ourselves and reprogram their expression. This new biology reveals why people can have spontaneous remissions or recover from injuries deemed to be permanent disabilities. What's a spontaneous remission? Where do we hear of spontaneous remissions commonly? Yeah, cancer is one of the most common ones where suddenly it's just gone. And the doctors say, I don't know, spontaneous remission. Well, something had to happen in there, and this idea that Lipton is presenting kind of helps explain that. Okay. Now he goes in these next two paragraphs where he talks about the difference of environments. We have some 50 trillion cells, but they all not a lot, 50 trillion. We have 50 trillion cells, and they are all like a community of cells making a certain thing happen. But they all still are individual cells. But the thing that in that last paragraph he mentions is the cells are either functioning in one of two ways, either in a growth promoting mode or a protective mode. The growth mode happens when the environment is free to function as it's designed. The protective mode happens whenever the stress response is on. It goes into protection. It goes into what can I do to preserve my survival. Okay? That's all. I don't want to go more into that because we understand that part already. But in this next, on the first real paragraph on the second page, the principal source of stress is the system's central voice, the mind. Remember, we've said that before in here. There's nothing stressful out here that causes us to feel stressed. It's always the mind. It's always our conscious thoughts that create that subsequent physiology. We've got that down. The mind is like the driver of a vehicle. With good driving skills, a vehicle can be maintained and provide good performance throughout its life. We're on the second page, second paragraph. Bad driving skills generate most of the wrecks that litter the roadsides or are stacked in junkyards. If we employ good driving skills in managing our behaviors and dealing with our emotions, then we should anticipate a long, happy, and productive life. In contrast, inappropriate behaviors and dysfunctional emotional management, like a bad driver, stress the cellular vehicle, interfering with its performance and provoking a breakdown. Now he asks, are you a good or are you a bad driver? Well, it all depends. Then he goes in, so that first paragraph on that page talked about the conscious mind, the one that's making the decision about how to drive. But then he says the subconscious mind, well, go up just a little bit. Let's just read that one. It says, before you answer that question, if you're a good or bad driver, realize there are two separate minds that create the body's controlling central voice. The self, in other words, the conscious mind, is the thinking you. It is the creative mind that expresses free will. And we've kind of hit that. We'll hit that again in a minute. Its supporting partner is the subconscious mind, a supercomputer loaded with a database of programmed behaviors. And we talked about that. Some programs are derived from genetics, Erica. These are our instincts and they represent nature. However, the vast majority of the subconscious programs are acquired through our developmental learning. They represent nurture. The subconscious mind is not a seat of reasoning or creative consciousness. It is strictly a stimulus response device. When an environmental signal is perceived, the subconscious mind reflectively activates a previously stored behavioral response. Okay? No thinking required. The subconscious mind is a programmable autopilot that can navigate the vehicle without the observation or awareness of the pilot, the conscious mind. When the subconscious autopilot is controlling behavior, consciousness is free to dream into the future or review the past, such as when you're driving the car. Okay? You don't have to worry about how do I do this. It just happens because your subconscious mind has figured out how to do it freely on its own. Okay? The dual mind system's effectiveness is defined by the quality of the programs carried in the subconscious mind. Get that? Is defined by the quality of the programs carried in the subconscious mind. Essentially, the person who taught you to drive molds your driving skills. For example, if you were taught to drive with one foot on the gas and the other on the brake, no matter how many vehicles you owned, each will inevitably, hard word to say, express premature brake and engine failure. Similarly, and get this is the real point of this paragraph. Similarly, if our subconscious mind is programmed with inappropriate behavioral responses to life's experiences, then our suboptimum driving skills will contribute to a life of crash and burn experiences. For example, cardiovascular disease, the leading cause of death, is directly attributable to behavioral programs that mismanage the body's response to stress. Okay, give an example of that. What would be an example of that? That last sentence.
If a mismanaged response?
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying like stressing about things that are not life-threatening, there's no better?
Yeah.
So a
Be
mismanaged
easy.
response would be to, instead of coping with it in a positive way, going to negative,
Okay.
like alcohol, drugs.
Okay.
Negative thought.
And I'm going to go even simpler than that. How about just the idea of coming up here and thinking that you're in danger? The instant you think you're in danger, stress response goes off, and that is a mismanaged, how did he word that? A mismanaged body's physiological response to a situation. Okay, you're not in danger, but your cells don't hear that. Okay? But the subconscious mind just thinks, oh, when I get up here and I'm in front of a group of people, then I'm supposed to be, the tape that it runs is, I'm nervous, I'm scared, something bad's going to happen. Okay, that's just one. Okay, got that so far? He says, so are you a good driver or a bad driver? The answer is difficult, for in our conscious creative mind, we may consider ourselves as good drivers. However, self-sabotaging or limiting behavioral programs in our subconscious unobservedly undermine our efforts. And the thought that came to my mind when I was going through this was, I know many people who have to have a Coke. They just have to have one. I know somebody pretty closely who she cannot function in a day. Oh, sorry. She cannot function in a day without a Coke. In her mind, she wants to get better. But in the middle of the day, almost totally unconscious, she's walking to the fridge and pulling out one of her 8 cans of Coke. Her mind thinks, oh, I'm going to get better, I'm a healthy person. But she just goes right for it. My brother, who was an alcoholic, every bit of his day was, oh, I got to get better. You know, got to have my drink. I got to get better. I know I got to get better. And got to have my drink. And he knows. He knew he shouldn't be drinking. It wasn't a good thing for him because he saw what it was doing to his life. But he couldn't help it. He couldn't help it is the idea. It says we are consciously unaware. We are generally consciously unaware of our fundamental perceptions or beliefs about life. We don't have our beliefs sitting in front of us. Oh, in order to live a healthy life, I should make these decisions. That's a belief. We don't have those front and center. They're just running in the background. But the belief, the stronger belief, or the one that my brother has, or this person who drinks the Coke is, I have that belief, but I have a stronger belief that says, I got to have the Coke. It's just a belief. Okay? The reason, and this is so interesting, this is so fascinating, it's almost knocks your head when you sense how powerful of a machine we're talking about and how it's already programmed. It says, the reason that we're not aware of our fundamental perceptions or beliefs is that the prenatal, in other words, inside of Erica, and neonatal brain, so newborn, is predominantly operating in delta and theta EEG frequencies through the first 6 years of our lives. Now, what does that mean, EEG frequencies? This is really interesting. What does it mean? This is brainwave activity. What's EEG frequencies?
Frequency to which your neurotransmitters fire.
Sort of. We have, as adults, we have 4 levels of brainwave activity. We have beta, alpha, theta, and delta. Okay? And it is, right now, most of us, this is like conscious awareness. Higher levels, if they hooked you up to an electroencephalograph, okay, they can measure this. We have machines in our own lab that kind of can do this. Sorry, alpha. Higher levels or more strong beta brainwave activity would indicate higher stress levels. Okay, measurable. Alpha levels are kind of the how some of you are right now just almost falling asleep. If you were hooked up to an electroencephalograph, those would be your primary brain waves that are going on as you start to fall asleep, as you're kind of, when we do the relaxation exercises in the stress management class, when we do meditation, you're primarily here at the beginning of them. Now, when you're asleep, when you and I are asleep, so this is deep sleep. And deep hypnosis. Remember last time when we talked about hypnosis?
Can you explain it a little bit more?
Which part?
the hypnosis is not in a, I'm standing by this position, but in this term, what would you
Same
define
thing.
it as the person is able to be controlled by something else, or is it?
They are more suggestible. They're far more suggestible. Hypnosis just, they put you in this state where you will believe whatever you're told, essentially. Okay? Conscious mind is sort of moved to the side. Well, what he's saying here, what's so fascinating of this paragraph, he says, through the first 6 years of our lives, we operate, most people operate, kids operate at these two levels, not these at all. So what that means is, while in this, he says, this low level of brain activity is referred to as the hypnagogic state. While in this hypnotic trance, which is how kids are, my kid is right in there, a child does not have to be actively coached by its parents, for they obtain their behavioral programs simply by observing their parents, siblings, peers, and teachers. Did our early developmental experiences provide you with good models of behavior to use in the unfoldment of your own life? During the first 6 years of life, a child consciously acquires the behavioral repertoire needed to become a functional member of society. We talked about how they figure out how to use a pencil and everything else. Learning is like on a steep curve in those first 6 or 8 years. In addition, a child's subconscious mind also downloads beliefs relating to self. When a parent tells a young child it is stupid, undeserving, or any other negative trait, this too is downloaded as a fact into the youngster's subconscious mind. These acquired beliefs constitute the central voice that controls the fate of the body's cellular community. While the conscious mind may hold one's self in high regard, the most powerful, and remember, it's 1,000,000 times more powerful, the subconscious, than the conscious. While the conscious mind may hold oneself in high regard, the more powerful unconscious mind may simultaneously engage in self-destructive behavior or any number of limiting beliefs. You may think to yourself, oh, I'm a really healthy person, or I'm a very, I can do things of my own will, or I can handle anything that comes my way. But some tape down in the real engine room is going, you suck. Because that's what was programmed into you when you were younger, and you didn't have a way to offset it. You didn't have any way to say, well, wait, no, I don't suck so bad. It was just hypnotized into you. That's the wrong word, but you get the idea.
And what was theta again, Mike?
Theta and delta are the two. These are together. Yeah, they're
Sleep and hypnosis.
deep. Yeah, when you're in deep levels of sleep, your mind is, both of those brainwave levels are cranking when you're in your deepest sleep.
So, I just want to make sure I'm getting it. So, when we say that children, especially under the age of 6, are so impressionable, is it because of this delta wave thing?
Exactly.
Like, if they are told, their parents drink Coke or whatever it is, all the time to say, oh, you're too young for this, but then as soon as they're old enough to have it, then it's, I gotta have this because that means I'm old enough.
Same idea.
Okay, just check.
Diana.
So my girlfriend was pregnant, had a baby, they were married, quickly got pregnant again. She didn't want it. He wanted to have babies boom, boom, right next to each other. She wasn't excited about that. Very upset about the second pregnancy, cried a lot, really, wanted more children, but not in that way. Felt like he kind of deceived her in the process. We were talking and I said, well, be careful because, this child will be what he's marinating in. Be mindful of how you are, your spirit, and what you're thinking.
Absolutely.
He will he is what a product of his marinate. And it's true. I mean, not that he's got major issues, and she kind of tried to change her mindset, but you could see it in anybody. I mean, I remember with myself too. When I was pregnant, I was really happy with being pregnant with Ian. Our situation wasn't excitable, but I was happy with Ian, and Ian was very happy, always smiling and in good spirits. So you kind of, I think of it that way. Like,
Yeah. Did I ever tell you the story of I don't know if I told this semester or not, of the woman who was depressed, went to the master hypnotist? Did I tell about that story? Kind of to accentuate your idea here. And it really does corroborate what we're talking about here. There was a lady who, but it actually was one of my friends. I was at my friend's house many years ago, and there was a lady there who was she called herself a master hypnotherapist. And I didn't know what that meant very much, but it sounded interesting, so she told us. And she told us of one experience she had with a young lady who could not, she had tried everything to get over, she was really depressed and she was really just down on herself, nothing was helping, and she'd tried medication and she tried all these different things to try to make sense of this. She'd gone to psychologists, psychiatrists, and nothing was helping. And so she went to this hypnotherapist, and talking about the neonatal or the prenatal environment that is happening at the subconscious mind. This therapist, the hypnotherapist, said, okay, we're going to go back in time and try to find where this first trauma, the idea is that if you can find that initial trauma, you remember the EFT stuff, find that initial trauma, deal with it in hypnosis, maybe it'll do some good. And so she took her back in time, and she said, I want you to go back. I really didn't tell this story? Okay. I want you to go back to the very first time when you felt this pain. And she was under hypnosis. She said, how big were you? How old were you? Tell me what was your size, or tell me about how old were you when you first felt this pain that's related to the problem you have, the trauma that's related to the problem you have. And she said, this is what the lady did. She said, she went like this. She was under hypnosis, and she went, it was that big. And she went, the hypnotherapist went. It turns out that this girl had been the result of a horrible rape. That she was and during the early part of the pregnancy, the guy kept, abusing the lady, and she felt it. Somehow she was feeling that in utero, in her, as she was just barely starting to grow. And when they discovered that, they were able to, I didn't hear what they did with her, but it was an interesting idea that I had never thought of before, that this really is, for those first 6 years, really you're just downloading everything. You're just whatever everyone tells me. That's why I really struggle with watching violent stuff on TV to kids, because they're just, oh, well, that's how life is, I guess. Okay. They're not conscious, Tara.
We're in a criminal justice class, and right now we're talking about whether or not babies should grow up or should be able to stay with their moms when they're first born if their moms are in jail like 6 months or less. And a lot of people are bringing up the argument that it's okay because the kids aren't aware of what's going on in the first 6 months of their life, so it's okay for them to be. And I said, you can't believe that it's not affecting them on a subconscious level, and that prison's an okay environment for them to be in just because they don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
That's something to think of.
And Lipton would say they're entirely subconscious of it. And because that's the case, they're just taking it all in as this is how it is. There was another something that you sparked a thought in my head and then it left. Well, I'll remember it in a second. That's very interesting. Where did we? Okay. The insidious part of the autopilot mechanism is that subconscious behaviors are programmed to engage without the control of or the observation by the conscious self. Since most of our behaviors are under the control of the subconscious mind, we rarely observe them or much less know that they're even engaged. Suddenly at 9 o'clock at night, you're going for the chocolate. I know I shouldn't be having this. As you put the chocolate chips in your hand, I know I shouldn't be having this, but I can't help it. None of us have that going on, do we?
As long as they're not in the house.
Exactly. While your conscious mind perceives you're a good driver, the unconscious mind that has its hands on the wheel most of the time may be driving you down the road to ruin. We have been led to believe that by using willpower, this is so interesting, we've been led to believe that by using willpower we can override the negative programs of our subconscious mind. Unfortunately, to do that, you really have to emphasize the word power, for one must keep a constant vigil on one's own behavior. The moment you lapse in consciousness, the subconscious mind will automatically engage and play its previously recorded experience-based programs. So, did that make sense to you guys? As soon as you stop saying, I'm in control here, and you kind of, you let your mind go, then the tapes turn back on. Whatever those tapes were. Oh, I remember what it was I was going to tell you. When I was going to school at Southern Illinois, I had a really good friend who was in clinical psychology. And now he's a clinical psychologist. I think he lives in Arizona now. And he told us that literally 95% of the people who are clinically off somehow, 95% of them, during the first 8 years of their life, they had been abused either sexually, physically, or emotionally. 90. So I don't believe for a second that they're not downloading that. Not for a second. The subconscious mind is really a tape player. There's no observing entity in the subconscious mind reviewing the behavioral tapes. We'll go over that in a second. Consequently, there is no discernment as to whether a subconscious behavioral program is good or bad. They are just tapes. That ticks me off. Crap, now I got to be in charge. The subconscious is strictly a playback machine. Perceived stimuli engage programmed behaviors. So, you see the chocolate chips? Can't help it. You see the Coke machine? I can't help it. You see the alcohol? You see the nervous place up in front of it? I can't help it. It's just the stimuli creates the push the on button of the tape. So interesting. In fact, people upon seeing their own subconscious programs play out frequently something like, they just pushed my buttons. We've all heard that before. In contrast to the power of the conscious mind, the subconscious mind is 1,000,000 times more powerful, an information processor. Also, as neuroscientists emphasize, the conscious mind provides 5% or less of the cognitive activity during the day. 95 to 99% of our behavior is directly derived from the subconscious. Hence the use of the word power in the concept of willpower. It takes significant effort for the conscious mind to keep tabs on the subconscious behavior. Positive thinking is primarily effective if the subconscious supports the conscious intention. We'll talk about that next time. The problem with trying to reprogram the subconscious is that we fail to realize it is playing behavioral tapes. This is so interesting. To understand why conscious awareness does not readily change subconscious programs, consider this instructive analogy. I provide you with a cassette tape, and you put it into your player and push the play button. As the tape plays the program, you realize you do not like it. So you yell at the tape player to change the program. You ask it to play something different. Think about how absurd that is. After a while of not getting a response, you yell louder and get angrier at the tape player because of the lack of a response to your request. What would that be like? I can think of many times where we get angry at our kids and we yell at them, come on, do it. And they're just running the tape. They can't logically think themselves into a different behavior unless we reprogram it, which is what we're going to talk about for the next 3 days. Sam?
Just a question on that. For personal experience, actually I've worked in a mortuary for a couple of years. During that time, when my first child was born, and when the phone went to law, it would wake everybody up. I was going to pick up and stuff. She's now 4 years old, and to this day she'll wake up several times throughout the night. She'll wake up, can't sleep. How would you work with that with a child? I mean, if that tape had been recorded, how?
Yeah, then it's a matter of, we'll go through all the reprogramming, but that would be one. And he even mentions down here at the bottom what he suggests, some energy psychology or energy therapy, which EFT would be one of those. But we're going to spend 3 or 4 days playing with how to do this reprogramming stuff. Because there are some really good ways. So after a while, you yell louder and get angrier at the tape player because of the lack of response to your request. Then when it seems hopeless, you beseech God to help you change the program. The point is simple. No matter how much you yell at the tape player, it will not change the program. To change a tape, you have to push the record button and then re-record the program, recording the desired changes. Then he says, there are 2 ways out of the problem, and I think there's more than that. But he says there are 2 ways. First, we become more conscious, which is the third. Erica, you said there's nature, nurture, and then you become conscious. So you just constantly be vigilant about what you're saying. We'll talk about that. The second, this path is similar to Buddhist mindfulness. You all know how to be mindful. That's one way. Second, we can use a variety of new energy psychology modalities enable rapid and profound programming of limiting subconscious beliefs. And he lists 2 or 3 down at the bottom, Psych K, holographic repatterning, I don't know what that is, and body talk. EFT is another one of these, and he actually promotes EFT as a suitable way to handle these this subconscious programming of incorrect beliefs, habits, whatever. Okay, what questions do you have about this before we jump into the other page? Does this make sense to everyone?
Yeah,
It's not your fault.
When I'm at a store or something and I hear their child crying and parents saying, stop your crying.
Right.
Stop your crying. And they're crying and crying. That's what it reminded me of. Like, just stop it. Just stop it now. And I'm like,
shut up.
So not going to make them stop. And we've probably done it as parents on occasion. But when you hear it, when you're outside of it, you're like, wrong.
Yes.
That's the way you have to kind of redirect and change the tape, I guess.
What is it? How does the saying go? That which you resist. Did we talk about that in here yet? Whatever you resist tends to persist. And whenever you resist that screaming, it tends to persist and grow. We'll play with that later on. It's a really cool idea. So I redid this and I added some things because we're going to explore this process even more deeply than we have to now. And the things that I added on this table up here, down there at the bottom, of this table, it says initiates beliefs. In other words, we have the belief I am shy. It's just a belief. There's nothing genetically making you shy, or just about every other emotional or behavioral state. There's nothing genetic about that. It's you've created that belief, and the tape just keeps running it. So it stores the beliefs. Now, this idea of, so how do we start making, how can we make a change to these tapes? Does everyone know? Because tapes is kind of 1990s and before. Does anyone not know what we say when I say cassette tapes? We all know, right? There will come a time when I'll say tapes and they'll go, what are you talking about? Nobody, yeah. I'm trying to figure out how to make it CDs, but yeah, they're all MP3s playing on your iPod. Yeah. The book that I found this from, or I got most of this bottom part from, is Dennis Deaton's book called, I brought that in last time, I think, the book on mind management, which is a terrific book. It's very terrific. It's very simple look at how the conscious subconscious mind works and how we can become our own creative source. But the way he aligns this in the 2 minutes, we've got the conscious and we've got the subconscious, and these are way bigger in comparison. But this is how the process works. This is how, when it says, we always reap what we sow. The law of the harvest is always in place. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. This is how this looks. Okay, so the conscious mind activates subconscious mind with dominant thoughts. Okay, they say we have 50,000, 60,000 thoughts a day. Well, not all of those get planted in the subconscious mind. Only those thoughts that we either unconsciously accept or we consciously continue to repeat in our mind. If you say to yourself, okay, I know I'm going to get sick. I just know I'm going to get sick. Everyone's sick around me. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get sick too. You've said that a whole bunch of times. It becomes a dominant thought. And so the idea of sick kind of melts down, and here's this fertile ground and the seeds planted. Or you could say, I really want a new TV. Let's say a TV. Well, we're not going to go there yet. I really want, what would be an appropriate, more local desire? Not ice cream. No, that's the creative. I'm going to be healthy. Okay. So whichever, yeah, healthy or sick. So I know I'm going to be okay during this flu thing that happens every year. And this is exactly what I say to myself. I say, it never happens to me. I never get sick, and I never get sick. But you hear people say, I'm going to, and the seed goes down there, and the subconscious mind goes, okay, number 2, once the seed is planted, it brings to the conscious mind plans to realize the dominant thought. Now, I don't want to make this, I don't want to pass over this, so we'll start with that on Wednesday. We don't have class on Friday, do we? So we'll start with this on Wednesday, and then we'll spend another week on this stuff. So good.